Good morning again. Our first reading this morning is by the poet Ross Gay. This comes from a collection he wrote in 2011, Bringing the Shovel Down. It's called Sorrow Is Not My Name. He dedicated to his friend Walter. Said it's after Gwendolyn Brooks, so he's taken the style of another famous black poet. Someone who would be his poetic ancestor. And it names, I think it starts with naming and recognizing that life is difficult, but he's looking for something more in it. Sorrow is not my name. No matter the pull toward the brink, no matter the florid deep sleep awaits, death is coming for us all eventually. There is a time for everything. Look, just this morning a vulture nodded his head, his red, grizzled head at me. And I looked at him, admiring the sickle of his beak. Then the wind kicked up, and after arranging that good suit of feathers, he up and took off, just like that. And to boot, there are on this planet alone something like 2 million naturally occurring sweet things, some with names so generous as to kick the steel from my knees. Agave, persimmon, stickball, the purple okra I bought for $2 at the market. Think of that. The long night, the skeleton in the mirror, the man behind me on the bus taking notes. Yeah, but look, my niece is running through a field calling my name. My neighbor sings like an angel, and at the end of my block is a basketball court. I remember. My color's green. I'm spring. Joy even in the midst of sorrow. The assigned Bible reading for this morning is from Matthew's Gospel. This is a conversation. It's kind of at the end of a series of moments where people, potential rivals or potential students or people who are curious, come to Jesus and ask questions and engender some debate. This is from Matthew 22. It says, talking about the folks who are feeling a little bit threatened by Jesus. Then the Pharisees went off and began to plot how they might trap Jesus by his speech, the things he says. They sent their disciples to Jesus, accompanied by sympathizers of Herod, who said, "Teacher, we know you're honest and teach God's way sincerely. You don't court anyone's favor and you don't act out of respect for important people. So give us your opinion then, in this case. Is it lawful to pay tax to the Roman Empire or not?" Jesus recognized their bad faith and said to them, "Why are you trying to trick me, you hypocrites? Show me the coin which is used to pay the tax." When they handed Jesus a small Roman coin, Jesus asked them, "Whose head is this, and whose inscription is it?" "Caesar's," they said. At that, Jesus said, "Then give to Caesar what is Caesar's, but give to God what is God's." When they heard this, they were astonished and went away. This is God's good news. 51 years ago today, 51 years later, I'm telling a jazz story. I'm just going to be upfront. This is another jazz story. You don't have to love the music to like the story. 51 years ago, not today, but this month, the great jazz bassist, Charles Mingus, was visiting Yale University to celebrate the kickoff of the Duke Ellington Fellowship Program. He was one of about 36 important black musicians being honored as that program got started. Duke Ellington himself was there to receive the first medal. This would have been just a couple of years before Duke Ellington died, if that. At one point during the proceedings, Mingus was in a jam session with 5 other bassists, including the one who was currently playing in Duke Ellington's band. Again, you don't have to like the music to appreciate the story that I'm about to say from it. But as someone who does, I so wish there was a recording of that, because it sounds like it was an entirely amazing event. Amazing until someone called in a bomb threat, at which point it became transcendent, which is an odd thing to say, I know. Except that this is what happened after the bomb threat came in. The police started evacuating everybody from the hall, and everyone started moving, which you would expect. Given a choice in the matter, people generally like to do the things that will keep their bodies all in one piece. And that's usually what the choice seems to be, right? Let the fear move you, or let the fear paralyze you. But what if sometimes there are choices that aren't obvious? Everyone started moving out of the auditorium, except for Charles Mingus. When the police captain tried to move him out, he snapped back. Racism planted this bomb, but racist ain't strong enough to kill this music. If I'm going to die, I'm ready. But I'm going out playing Sophisticated Lady. Jaime, that's why I asked for you to play that for the offertory today. And that's why he did. While everybody moved to the exit, Mingus stood up on the stage with his bass, and he started plucking out the opening strains of Duke Ellington's amazing ballad. He played the opening notes, and then he just kept going. The New Yorker article, writer Claudia Roth Pierpoint wrote about it in a later reflection. She said it became a protest song as the performance just kept going on and getting hotter. In the street, Ellington stood in the waiting crowd just beyond the theater's doors, smiling. Whatever the person who called in that bomb threat expected to have happen, it was surely not a transcendent bass solo that they were expecting. But that's what held together beauty and rage and resistance as it touched on the sublime. It brought the presence of God into a hellish moment. And sometimes that's exactly what the Spirit does as we are led through the valley of the shadow of death. That's me giving a call back to Priscilla's sermon last week, because jazz musicians like to quote each other in their music. Sorry, I can't help myself. The unexpected, that is sometimes the best place to find God. Sometimes it's the only place. I am going to talk about that bit from Matthew that I read. And truth be told, I had a really hard time this week deciding which of the Bible lessons I wanted to talk about. The Hebrew Bible reading would have taken us back to the book of Exodus, sitting once again with Moses while he wondered if he was capable of leading this whole group of people, while he worked out his anxiety about leading people who weren't sure they wanted to follow him, while he was companioned by a God he wasn't sure he trusted to keep companioning him. At least in the story, Moses was timider than Mingus. He needed a lot of reassurance that God was going to be with him. So he's out in the desert saying, God, prove that you're going to lead us through all of this space. That's what the story of Exodus is. It's one series after another of crises in the desert while people are escaping from their enslavement and going to whatever comes next. Moses says, if you're really going to be with us, show me your glory. Prove that you're going to do this. So God said, sure, come up on the mountain and I will show myself to you, except that you can't see my face, because no one can see my face and live. So I will cover you until I pass by, and you can see my back. I know I didn't read it. That's just the Cliff Notes version of the story. I will confess that somewhere in my youth, when I read all the way through the Bible, my adolescent brain added an extra syllable to that story, so that instead of God saying, you shall see my back, I long remembered it as God saying, you will see my backside. I spent an embarrassingly long amount of my young adulthood thinking it was a story about God mooning Moses. And while I think that God does have a sense of humor, I could not make any sense out of that. I thought it was especially strange. And I kept waiting for the part in the King James Version coming after it, where God spake unto Moses, saying, "Lookest thou not under there?" And Moses said, "Under where?" And God said, I made you say underwear. It's not that. It wasn't that story. God was not playing juvenile pranks on Moses. But it does seem to me that this story lets us know that the best ways, or the best views of God we get come in sideways glances. We can't look head on, but we might be able to see God shimmering out of the corner of our eye, even in the ugliest and least likely of circumstances. And that's what I was going to talk about if I talked about that story this morning, which I guess I just did. Then we have this story of Jesus being set up to fail by people who find him threatening. Some Pharisees have sent their followers to ask him a religious and ethical question that would have been a lively one among people of the day. Is it lawful? Is it pleasing to God for us to pay taxes to the empire that rules over us, that squeezes us? Should we keep doing this, or should we resist, either openly or covertly? I always want to add a footnote about the Pharisees because they get a really bad rap in the New Testament. The Gospel of Matthew in particular. They were faithful people who wanted to keep Judaism alive in a threatening world. Jesus and the Pharisees actually overlapped quite a lot in their positions and their understandings of things. But the Pharisees also thought Jesus was someone who might bring the wrong kind of attention from the Roman authorities. So in this story, at least they tried to set him up to see if they could cut off his base of support. Their followers showed up. They were accompanied by some other people who were supporters of Herod the king, the local ruler who was propped up by Rome, who was kept in power by Rome so that he would keep order there. And this is who the Pharisees' disciples brought with them when they asked Jesus a question about paying taxes to the empire. In case you missed the significance, Matthew sets up the whole story like he's Admiral Akbar in Return of the Jedi. It's a trap! That's the first thing it says right there in the story. It's a trap! There was no right answer in that context to that question. Is it right to pay taxes? If he said yes, then he was accommodating the empire that was squeezing the people. If he said no, then you'd better believe that Herod's supporters would get the word back and that the rabbi was going around telling people to deprive the empire of its income. What say you, teacher? Yes or no? There's a bomb threat here. Will you run out or will you freeze? They put him on a high wire without a net, and then they trained the industrial fans on him and turned them on high. But he rejected the binary. This is actually the second place in Matthew's gospel where Jesus was asked a question about taxes. In the first one, it was about paying the temple tax. Every year, every Jewish male was supposed to pay a nominal tax that supported the functioning of the temple. Someone had confronted Peter. Does your rabbi teach you to pay this? And Peter said, oh, yeah, and then went to Jesus and said, do you encourage us to pay this? And Jesus said, well, the substance of what he said was, it's not actually necessary for us, but we do this so that we don't cause offense and don't ripple the water here. But in this story, it finishes with a little bit of magic. Jesus said, yeah, we paid this tax, so go down to the sea and cast in a net, and the first fish that you catch, look in its mouth, and you're going to find a coin that will cover for both of us for the temple tax for this year. It's a strange and kind of amusing story. Uh, in this story, people come wanting to know, do you pay the empire's tax? It might be telling that in neither of these stories did Jesus actually have a coin. When it came to the temple tax, Jesus said, yeah, we pay it. Go take what God provides, or take what a fish provides. Fish shall provide. And then when the people came to trap him on the question of paying taxes to the empire, he didn't have a coin either. He didn't have a Jewish coin the first time. He didn't have a Roman coin the second time. He asked the people who were asking him the question, show me a coin. So one of them pulled it out of their pocket to show the coin. The message might be, hey, y'all are the ones who are tangled up in this whole money system, not me. If you're going to play that game, then you've got to pay its dues. It's a tough teaching that might raise big questions for us. It might raise even bigger questions for those of us who are going to be part of that book study on poverty by America next week. We live unavoidably in a system that is based on money. Is it right to use rewards cards if we know that our rewards are coming from other people's debts? Do we shop at places where the wages and benefits are so low that people have to apply for government aid? If the stock market is squeezing employees, then what do we do about our 401ks or 403bs or the funds that support people's educations? Those are big, complicated questions. And you might notice that in this story, Jesus was given a yes or a no, and he didn't really answer it. He didn't spell it out. He left it all hanging in the air. The Pharisees and Herod's supporters thought they'd set him up with a question that he couldn't answer. Instead, he turned it around with something even bigger. The yes or no question, but there is no definitive yes or no answer to it. He gives the clearest answer possible, which is to give to Caesar what is Caesar's and give to God what is God's. But he doesn't define which is which. What do we owe to God? That's the bigger question. He doesn't say explicitly what it is, as if he's saying, you've got to work this out for yourselves. And the easy answer would be to say everything. Of course, we owe everything to God. But what does that look like? It's not straightforward. It's more complicated than a simple yes or no. The context of each life is different. But hold together the pith of these two scripture stories. We don't get to see God straight on, but we'll only get sideways glances and intimations. So keep looking, always looking. And sometimes the best thing to do when you're faced with an impossible question is to take that sideways glance and find a new possibility out of the impossible. Out of the corners of our eyes, there's always more that beckons. In the face of the bad options and the false choices, we can maybe feel our way toward something different together. That God is there even in those impossibly challenging and complicated questions. That, as Ross Gay would have it, that even a vulture has dignity in its good suit of feathers, that everyone deserves to have somebody who's excited to see them, that the most important act of praise is the love and care that we offer each other, that the best response to a bomb threat is a bass solo that goes on and on until everything drops away but the Spirit's fire and awe. New possibilities out of the impossible, out of the sideways glances of God. These are God's good news. Amen.